This is 152, Incident Response, and today we're talking about the Handbook of Incident Response Management. So I'll get my slides and let's talk about that. Of course, feel free to pipe up with any questions or comments. I see good 23 people in the Twitch. I hope I'm reaching everybody. All right, so a computer security incident is when somebody is violating your security policy, doing some kind of harm on your computer network, of course. And so this is data theft, the most common one, theft of money through the computer, extortion like ransomware, unauthorized access, where people are like what just happened to Microsoft. People are able to find the keys and get into other people's databases where they shouldn't go, malware, or putting illegal or unauthorized materials on the network. And so the first, you have to define the goals of incident response. And there's investigate and then remediate. First, you have to investigate to figure out exactly what happened. How did they get in? What systems were affected? What damage was done? Is the incident still going on? You have to put out the fire. That's why early on you do containment. Determine the time frame, and then you remediate. Develop a remediation plan of how you're going to end this incident, and then you execute it to kick out the bad guys and plug the holes that let them in. And so your team has to have a lot of people. You have to have compliance, of course, to consider your legal obligations. You may have to, maybe a regulated industry that has to obey financial compliance or medical compliance or many things. Your human resources are important, so you know how it's going to affect your employees. I remember when there was the fake security incident at the college, the crooked CTO we had did not tell anybody at the college. He went straight to the San Francisco Chronicle to put it on the front page, so the staff woke up the next morning reading their newspaper, and they said, the college has been hacked. What does this mean? Do I need to get a new credit card? Do I need to change my password? Is it safe to go to work and use my normal computer? And there were no answers. And you don't let this happen. You have to tell your human resource people, what does this mean from our staff? They're going to have a whole bunch of obvious, predictable questions when there's a security incident. Your network infrastructure matters. They're going to be part of tracking down how it would spread and what part of the network you should shut down and such. Your business managers, your IT support, and your legal will all have to be involved. So, all these people will have legitimate interests. They're what they call stakeholders. They're people who will be affected by this incident, and you need to include them on the team so they can put in input saying, don't go saying this stupid thing because that'll make trouble for legal. Or make sure and tell the tech support people what they should say when people call them, like customers saying, what does this mean for us? You have to give them some kind of information and tell them what they're supposed to be telling the customers, that sort of thing. So the incident manager runs the team, and this is a business executive. They do not have to be involved in the technical side very much. Their main job is that they can get action quickly. They have to be important enough in the company that they can spend money, allocate resources, and they have to be trusted by the top executives so they can go to them and say, here's what we need to do. We need to actually shut down our systems and stop making money and violate our contractual obligations to people who we promise service to because we have to shut down this system and things like that. All right. Then you got your remediation team, and this is a technical role, the focal point for these activities. They're going to figure out how sensitive the stolen data is, what kind of action is necessary, and what changes will improve your posture so this won't happen again. And this is why one thing beginning security people do, which I did when I was new in the business, is they'll look at something like, I went to Amazon, and a bunch of Amazon was not using HTTPS. And I said, boy, these guys are idiots. They should just use 100% HTTPS everywhere. And then Dan Kaminsky piped up and said, oh, no, that's too much bother. And I said, wow, I didn't expect that from you. And he said, well, you get involved, you'll find out that that's not as easy as you think it is. You got business partners, you got customers, you got advertisers. You can't just throw the switch tomorrow and turn on HTTPS everywhere. And that's the kind of thing. You have to, it is not so easy to just improve all your security. You can't just turn on one blanket solution. You have to consider the real cost and then have a plan to get there. And a lot of other teams, your legal teams, your compliance officers, IT, network infrastructure, and all these groups, and public relations, of course, you've got public relations determining like what you tell the newspapers and what you questions you get from people out there and stuff, and you ought to be telling them what they're supposed to be saying. All right. PCI is one group that, one thing about your compliance groups is they might not care about your company very much. Like PCI is famous for this. PCI is kind of a fraud. A lot of people have pointed this out. Every credit card breach, of which there have been tons. I think recently ransomware is still in the headlines, but up to maybe 3 years ago, all we heard about was credit card breaches like every week forever. All of those were people that were PCI compliant. They wouldn't have had any credit card numbers if they weren't PCI compliant. And the PCI is industry self-regulation, which is famously sort of a contradiction in terms. So, for example, PCI, in the late 1990s, I think WEP was invented, wired equivalent privacy, and it was completely hacked by 2001. By 2001, there were hacking tools that would just break right into wired equivalent privacy, wireless networks without the key, and everybody knew how to do it. And PCI continued to let people send credit card numbers over WEP encrypted networks until 2010. And all they had to do was say it was too much bother to change, and they could easily get an extension until 2012. So for 11 years, they would let people send credit card numbers over a network that they knew was completely compromised. And a lot of things like that happen. So a lot of people are pretty upset. For at least the last 10 years, I've been hearing a lot of people say, this PCI compliance is totally not strong enough. The government's going to move in and make an official government compliance, but that never happened. Anyway, so their point is they have two concerns. One is to help you recover, and the other is to somehow protect their brand and avoid your hack from becoming a stain on their reputation. So they will have a motivation to say it was your fault for not doing it right or something. Anyway, it's a thing to be aware of. Other stakeholders have different priorities than the priorities of your company. This, by the way, is another reason why people usually try not to involve law enforcement. I mentioned before in this course, when somebody hacks you, usually don't really care who they are or try to hunt them down or anything. If you do report it to law enforcement, they will then start an investigation, and you won't be able to stop that investigation. And that investigation might start uncovering things about your company that get you in trouble, and you might have wished you hadn't opened that can of worms. So it's involving any outside entity is a decision that has to be considered carefully, because they will then come barging in to your incident, pushing their agenda. And that may or may not be what you really want as a company. Although if it's a huge scandal like that oil pipeline, then there's no covering up, there's no stopping everybody and their brother from coming in and getting involved. That's too big. Anyway, so you got to find talent. Now, one obvious thing you might do, which is I think probably what most companies do, is they do not have any security staff that can do IR really. They just have IT staff that can keep this stuff going. And when they get hacked, they hire consultants like Mandiant, and that's an option. Vampire theory, once you invite them in, you can't get them out. Yeah, that's a fair statement. Yeah. And so you hire an outside consultant, they come in and do it. Now, that's expensive, but it only happens when you get hacked. And if you don't think you're going to get hacked very often, maybe it's all right. And there you have the question. Are you the kind of company that likes to outsource things? Do you just focus on your main business, like baking cookies, and when a technical thing happens, you hire a consultant? That's one way to run a company. The other way to run a company is like you are primarily a tech company like Google, and therefore you would have your own knowledgeable in-house people to do all the technical things, and you would not expect to outsource things. So, it's an issue. So there are a lot of considerations in deciding whether you want to hire a consultant or you want to grow your own team. So trying to hire IR talent to be on your own team is kind of tough. As you probably have noticed already, there is no certification in this business. There is no IR certification. There's not even a forensic certification. There are a few of them, like FTKACE and NCASE Certified Examiner, but they haven't really got much traction, I think, to where everybody expects to have them. I think so. You can't just expect people to have a certification and then know that they're good IR. So you got to sort of run around, try to find people with college programs that covered this, although I know the college programs are extremely uneven. So even if somebody has a master's in information assurance, that doesn't really mean they know much. There's a bunch of them that don't accomplish much at all in those programs. So it's tough. So You try and figure out one thing. What everybody always wants is experience. What they would really like is for you to have experience in the field. Then they would believe you can do it. They believe that far more than from any kind of certification or degree. But of course, the experienced people, you usually can't find them. There aren't enough of them. There's a monstrous skills shortage in security of all kinds, and anybody with experience has many job offers. So, but this is what you'd like, of course, experience in things like forensics and traffic analysis, or the applications you use, whatever they are. So, what you want on an IR team is you need people that are very analytical, that can analyze things. It'd be nice if they're a good communicator, and attention to detail is good. But the main thing is they're solving a problem. It's like being a detective on TV. You have some clues. You have some ability to find more clues. You have to figure out what happened, put together the pieces. And it's interesting. It's not that different than, say, troubleshooting. Your network is not working. What part of it is broken? How do you test things to figure out what part is broken? How do you improve the system so this won't break again? It's not that different, really. All right, and like I say, there are industry certifications, but I don't think there's any that are really widely respected in this field. There's a few out there, but and there are some people that just get a lot of certs, which means probably they're just cheating on the test or something. And I remember there's something like 300 information security certs. There was a list that came out 6 months ago that just makes you want to cry. I mean, nobody could get all those. No college program could cover all those. Nobody could reasonably expect you to have all those. It's sort of nuts, Anyway, there's a few big ones like CISSP and Security Plus and Net Plus and CCIE. How many certs is too much? Boy, I don't know. I don't think there's any clear rule. I don't know. I guess I have about 12 or 14. I don't think that's too much. But, I think I wouldn't start worrying that you have too much until you go over 10, just as a wild guess. But I'm not a corporate hiring manager. I don't have any particular standing to make this judgment. But I know there used to be a famous paper MCSE. There are a bunch of people would have the cert and they couldn't actually do anything. So, people will go to like a cheat website and get the questions and then cheat and get the cert, and then you find out pretty quickly they don't know anything. And I know in other countries, like I have been told this is true of India, I don't know particularly, that you can just pay somebody else to take a test for you, and everybody does. So a bunch of people have certs, but they don't actually know anything at all. Security Plus is pretty valuable. I mean, Security Plus does not get you much more than a very rudimentary job, but it does show interest in the field. So you normally start with the CompTIA stuff, A+, Net Plus, and Security Plus. That's a good start. And that may not be enough to get you a job, but it might get you an internship. SSCP is definitely better, I think. That's the half of a CISSP one, right? The CompTIA one. Let me just check. SSCP. I think that's the one that's half of a CISSP. Oh, that's ISC squared. But that's ISC squared is good. But is that the one that's half of a CISSP? Security Administrator. I guess I don't really know what an SSCP is. But I think anything from ISC squared is pretty good. Yeah, Security Plus. Yeah. It's on the list of the official government military requirements, and so is Certified Ethical Hacker. They're the only people that respect it, I think. Security Plus it's good. It's not very advanced, but it's a good beginning cert. After that, you'd be expected to move on to a more advanced one, like a Certified Ethical Hacker is the military sort of track. If you're really a real pen tester, you should get the OSCP, Offensive Certified Security Professional. Offensive OSCP, whatever it is. Let me get the OSCP, Offensive Security Certified Professional. This is the one that is really respected by for real professional pen testers, far more than Certified Ethical Hacker, which doesn't really prove anything. In Australia, SSCP is recognized. Well, I didn't know about that, but I'm not too surprised. Yeah, anything from ISC squared is usually pretty good. They got a good reputation. Good, these are good points. Well, let's try some Cahoots. I've got them here. And here. Okay, this is 152.2a. There it is. And I think it's remembering that I want to show the questions. Yes, good. This will make it easier. I appreciate a student pointing out that new feature to me. I remember Millworm. I think they shut down, right? Yeah. Oh, I'll give it a few more seconds. Looks like that's it. All right, so which of these is not a security incident? Yeah, that's it, because it did not happen. This is a thing where a security incident was prevented. All right. That's just an HR incident. Somebody tried to do a bad thing and you caught them. All right, which of these is not a common goal? That's it. Most companies don't really care who attacked them, but they really care about these other things. Well, how did they get in? When did they get in? What did they do? All right, what's the most important ability of the manager? That they have to have power in the company. They have to be able to convince people to expend resources and make decisions that will have financial consequences. So it's not just general communication skills, it's particular authority, which is related to communication skills, but a different thing. All right. All right. So what stakeholder might have other goals more important to them than your recovery? Yeah, PCI is famous for this. All right. Okay, that's a real name, and I know who that is, and I don't know who that is. They're not going to get their points unless they come out of the closet. All right. go back to here. It's 6:30. Good. We can go through another section here. So, all right. So the process of incident response. You have the initial response, and then investigation, and then remediation. I've seen various lists of groups. This is one possible way to look at it. So initial response is to assemble the team, grab whatever data you can get at really fast, and then you determine what's going on in general terms. How big is it? What kind of problem? And then you decide how the potential impact is. Boy, I remember I worked at a escrow agency, and a claimant called in and said, the name on my check is wrong. I'm like Martha Bravo, but the check says Mary Bravo. And we said, well, you fax us a copy of that check, and they did, and it was totally wrong. And we found that the whole database had been shifted, so the first name of customer A went on the last name of the next customer. And that meant most of them had the names close enough that they'd cash the check, but some of them were getting checks in the wrong amount now. They were cashing other people's checks. And we've had the immediate question was, how big is the financial loss here? How big is our exposure? Because the owner of the company said, I have connections at banks, and even though it's after 5 p.m., I could call the bank, and they could cancel the account right now, and then all those checks will bounce, and we'll be on the hook for all those fees, and we will fail to meet our legal compliance of the date we had to distribute this money, but that all might be worth it if we're losing a lot of money here. So you need to know how much is the total difference between them getting the right check and them getting the check. And I was the database guy figuring this stuff out at like 5:30 p.m. on Friday, assessing the potential impact so they could decide which of the dangerous actions had to be taken at this point. So is compliance a subset of EMV compliance? I don't know. Is EMV the electronic... I don't even know what EMV is, so that's giving me a clue how much my advice is worth, but let me take a look. EMV is all business... Oh, that's the thing. Yeah, EMV is where everything had to move to the electric chip cards. That's right. I think it's just part of it. I remember that was an issue. A couple of years ago, America finally moved to the smart cards. So I think it's all part of it. There's little I know about it, though. I've never set up PCI compliance, although some of my students have. All right, so here's the things you might do in the initial phase, initial response. You would interview people who reported things to find out what they saw, interview staff, business unit people, review logs, and document the information. And this is very much like what police do when they get a call, like something has happened. The first thing you do is get on the scene and they start talking to people. What happened here? What did you see? And you just get a general picture what's going on. Then you have the investigation. After you have some initial information about basically what's happening, now you try to figure out what's happening here. If you just jump to re-imaging servers to make everything good, you might get nowhere because you might make things worse instead of better, as we'll see. So you have initial leads. Something happened to mean you notice there's an incident, and then you begin an investigation and you determine some indicators of compromise, some names of people, signatures of malware, files, network traffic, some kind of clues of what kind of stuff was involved in this incident. So then you deploy those IOCs. You have a system that will push these out to your servers, saying, are these things present on the server? With a tool like Velociraptor is the tool we're going to use for this, that can send a hunt where it goes to all the servers and said, do you have this file? Do you have this registry key? And they tell you that you deploy them, then you get answers. Now you find systems of interest. Now when you find a machine that is involved in the attack, you then collect evidence from that machine, like what other processes are running, what other things have been done like in the time period of interest. And then you analyze that data, and that will give you new IOCs, new clues, new indicators of compromise, and then you deploy that. And you go around and around doing this until you're not finding any new information. And then you have found everything you can reasonably find. You may not have found everything, but you found everything you're likely to find, and then you can move on to remediation. That's generally how it works. And this, by the way, is true of all computer forensics. It goes the same way. You start with some information, you search on those keywords, you find more keywords, and when you're not finding any more new keywords, then you're done. All right. Now, if you jump right into remediation, this is a mistake companies usually make when they're not good at incident response, because what they have experience with is just IT help desk. They're used to people saying, oh, the server is down. So they say, all right, just replace the hard drive, re-image the server, put it back up. So that's their response to things. Well, if there's a problem, just re-image the server from the backup, and you'll get back on the road. So that would be fine for like a mechanical breakdown, but for a hack, that might not be good at all, because they have already spread to many other systems. They've already put on many other backdoors. And when you re-image just one server, you don't actually kick them out. Instead, you just alert them that you're onto them, and now they dig in deeper. So this is something that is the difference between a company that has no clue about incident response and a company that understands how incident response works, is that they don't just jump to remediation. Instead, they do an investigation and figure out what's really going on here, and then plan a remediation event that will really effectively kick out the bad guys. All right. So here's some common mistakes. Don't assume that everything uses malware, or just use malware scans as your only tool, because especially nowadays, a lot of people have avoided using malware. They use living on the land binaries. They just use existing Microsoft tools to do the bad stuff. Try to find leads that are relevant to the incident. Try to find things that will really help you narrow it down, like IP addresses, time ranges, and actionable things. You have to have information that will somehow leave a trace you can find. So here's indicators of compromise: directory or file names, login events, things you'll see in event logs, persistence mechanisms like scheduled tasks or registry keys, IP addresses and domain names, and network traffic. These are all good indicators of compromise. There's something you can hunt for and find, and without any great difficulty. So there are some attempts to create a standard format for indicators of compromise. Mandiant made one, MITRE made one, and Yara made one. If you want to publish indicators of compromise, or if you find that the malware that you find on your system has actually been analyzed by somebody else and they have published the indicators of compromise, they may have published it in one of these formats. So we'll look something like this. You have an XML document that just has information here like kernel32.dil, win.ini. Here's just explorer.exe. This just looks like a list of files or something, or processes. But anyway, you just have a list of things like files or registry keys or something in some kind of format. And the reason they put it in something like XML is they're hoping to make it machine readable, so you can import it into some system and then deploy it, like to watch on your network for it with Splunk or something. So you try to move it into some kind of enterprise IR platform, or scripts, or window. So various ways to do it. And I mentioned the main thing we're going to do in this course is use Velociraptor, which is wonderful. If you didn't have a tool like Velociraptor, which is in previous times I taught this class we didn't, you would actually have to write a script, which would look for these things and then deploy the script from the domain controller. And that's one way to do it. Really, that's all Velociraptor is. It's just a product that automatically will do that. You can choose off a list of things, and it will then write the script for you and deploy it and gather the results for you, so you don't have to bother with that. So it's very nice. It's essentially just doing this, pushing out a script saying list all the registry keys, finds the ones that match this regular expression, and send those back to me. Which, by the way, is not all that different than what the bad guys do, like we were talking about last time. They wrote a tool that would go out to the target payment systems, scan the memory, find the credit card numbers, zip them up, and send them back. And that's essentially what this does, only this is for defense instead of offense. All right, so you have your various formats. Snort is the standard for network signatures, but there isn't really a standard for other indicators of compromise signatures yet. So when you deploy the indicators of compromise, you find hits. These are machines where those indicators of compromise were found. Now, then you have to check. Your hit could be a false positive. If your indicator of compromise is not precise enough, it might trigger on a clean machine. And so you have to review and see, is this machine really part of the attack? And then look there. So you validate the time frame to see, is whatever I found on that machine really happening at the right time to be part of this attack, or is it just something else? Then you categorize it, like access with valid credentials, SQL injection, data theft. Give it, put it in categories, and then as you scan, you prioritize machines, and then you decide which machines are worthy of further investigation. And you want to investigate them to see what else was done, because typically the the bad guys will come in by finding a vulnerability. Like right now, it might be the print spooler vulnerability, a big popular vulnerability that probably hasn't been patched yet. They'll get in with that, and they'll run a little piece of malware, which probably downloads more malware. Then they'll get a persistent backdoor on one machine. Then they'll put on more malware and make that scan the rest of your network. Then they'll attack those other systems with different tools. So there's a bunch of different tools and series of indicators of compromise on your network, and the one you found is just one of them. So you have to find what else did they do. Find a machine that they went on, and then analyze to see what else have they been doing on this machine. So you want to preserve the evidence. This is your general plan. You want to minimize the changes and not waste any more time than you have to, and create a record of what you found. And as we'll see, Velociraptor is wonderful this way. It has a little agent running on the machine. It can answer a question and send you just the information you need quickly without giving you far too much, which is what you'd get with old-fashioned forensic techniques like imaging the whole hard drive. In principle, that gives you everything, but in practice, it gives you far too much. So now you're just drowning in data that is not what you need. So that's the old-fashioned technique, because the original plan, the old-fashioned forensics were intended to investigate crime scenes to put people in prison. So they would want to say, give me everything on that computer and put it in Exhibit F, and then we will examine Exhibit F for months, figuring out who did what here. And then we'll go to court and say, here is Exhibit F. You know, that's the thing. The first thing is to grab all the evidence, and then months later somebody will examine it. That's the crime forensics. But in instant response, you don't have time for that at all. You need to get an answer now so you can decide what to do now, because somebody is still in your network hacking your stuff. So anyway, all right. So live response is the most common method. You run a script on the machines while they're running to see if they have certain things, not to get everything off them with an automated tool. And then you collect volatile and non-volatile information. The volatile information is stuff that will vanish when the power goes off, like network connections and running processes. The non-volatile information is stuff that is preserved when the power goes off, like files and folders. So you send a query to request certain data from the machine, and you record it. All right. And so you might collect memory. You could collect the whole memory image, which is less overwhelming than a disk image, but still pretty big. Or more likely, you would just get the particular process memories for the processes of most importance to you. But a lot of malware is memory resident now. A lot of attacks are memory resident. They don't put any files on the hard drive because they would get caught by antivirus, so they just put signatures in memory. And so looking in the memory is often the most important place to go. One thing about memory, though, which is why in the old-fashioned criminal-based forensics they would say ignore the memory, is nothing in the memory has a timestamp or an owner. You don't really know when it got there. You don't really know who put it there. So if you're trying to prosecute somebody for doing something bad on a computer like child porn, the memory is not going to do you any good, because you won't have an owner or a timestamp. But in instant response, that's not so important. You just want to see what happened, and you're not really super interested in proving exactly who did it when. You just want to see what's going on, so you can follow the trail. All right. But the old-fashioned technique, which you might want to use, is a forensic image of the entire disk, a complete duplicate of every bit on the hard drive, which is then a large file, which you then use a powerful tool like Encase or FTK or maybe Autopsy to analyze. And you can spend weeks digging through everything on that disk, finding out everything that's been going on in that computer. And, sometimes you do that. Like if you find out that an employee of your company has actually been embezzling the money, and you really want to prosecute them and send them to prison, then you might do this. Get their whole disk image, really go through it, really get evidence that can go to court. But normally, you don't do that in instant response. So then you analyze the data. You might analyze malware to see how it works. You might analyze the stuff that comes in from live response to see what's happening. You can do the disk image. In any case, if you don't want to waste your time just figuring out everything that's been happening, you want to have realistic questions to answer. It is easy to spend too long analyzing a monstrous thing like a disk image. And then there's remediation. When you stop finding new events, when you've gone around that circle, indicator of compromise, investigate, find more indicators of compromise, and you're not finding anything new, then you quit. You say, well, I found everything I can find. That's what we call a steady state. I don't really know I've found everything, but I know there's no point doing this any longer because I'm not finding anything new. I've found everything I'm going to find. So now you plan remediation. We have been planning it hopefully all along. Then you plan your remediation event that will kick out all the bad guys, all their backdoors, all their persistence mechanisms, and all the vulnerabilities they used. So hopefully you can kick them out and keep them out. All right. So I got another Kahoot here, which is 152 2B. Good. All right. I'll give it a few more seconds. All right. All right, so which phase includes re-imaging the servers? All right, you'd only do that in remediation. You wouldn't want to do it any earlier. All right. What phase includes forensic analysis of disk images? Okay, that's the investigation part, of course. Okay. Which phase includes interviewing the person who reported the incident? Okay, that's of course initial. All right. And what phase includes deploying IOCs? Yeah, that's an essential part of investigation. You find IOCs, you deploy them, you find more IOCs, you deploy them. That's essentially the loop of investigation. All right. All right. All right. That person will have to tell me who they are if they want points. And that looks like a real name. Good. Good. All right. 6:50. All right. Well, let's take a 10-minute break till 7 then, and then I'll carry on with the last section of the chapter. So I'll be back.